I certainly agree there. But actually, I believe the program has become over-focused on sample return, in my view. I'll say why. First of all, I do not think we need to do a Mars sample return before we send humans to Mars. We went to the moon before we did a sample return from the moon. In terms of whatever hazard Martian biology might offer to astronauts, I think the notion of live microbes at the Martian surface is extremely far-fetched. They can't have liquid water at the Martian surface, which is a necessity for life. It's bathed in ultraviolet. And of course, there can't be human pathogens on Mars because there are no humans on Mars, and so you cannot propose a valid life cycle for such organisms. I think there very well might be life in Mars, underground, in the Martian groundwater, and I think they're of enormous scientific interest, and I think our best chance of getting them and finding them and being able to study them is by sending humans to Mars and drilling down into the groundwater. I think that well, we have a high-risk mission tomorrow, Sunday. And, of course, we're all hoping that this is going to come out well. And if it does, it will be, by far, the best Mars surface exploration mission that has ever been flown. There's no doubt about it. But there's an awful lot of eggs riding in this basket right now, not just the $2 billion mission, but the credibility of the program and the potential for creating new missions later in this decade, which is very much a question. If we blow this one, we'll blow those too. In any case, I think that, in other words, if I had been running the program in 2004, after the success of the landing of the Spirit and Opportunity, and that was demonstrated to be successful, I would have said, here we have a very successful system. Why don't we churn these things out? Start sending 2 of them every 2 years to Mars, different locations with different instruments, conducting different kinds of investigations, make them into a workhorse, integrate them with various rovers over time, you know, different kinds of things, have a very vibrant program, essentially a low-risk program, where we would not be in a, you know, all-or-nothing situation as we are now, and learn about Mars in all kinds of ways, so as to prepare the way for human exploration. But I do not see how the sample return as such is vital for human exploration, and I think saying that it is actually creates an obstacle to human exploration. And I think that human explorers on Mars, as far as sample returns, and I'm all for sample return, but I'd like to do a sample return from a human expedition that gathers 500 kilograms of samples selected out of 10,000 kilograms of things that they looked at and you know, decided these were the important ones and took back. And that would be, you know, that's the right way to do sample return. I think that extrapolating the robotic program to sample return is taking it beyond where it beneficially trades off against human exploration. Now, and especially since, I mean, it'd be one thing if you said, okay, look, let's say Curiosity lands successfully. Now we've got a system that can land 900 kilograms on the Martian surface. And you say, okay, we're going to do this simple. We're going to land a lander with a 2-stage ascent vehicle. It will deploy a small rover, grab some samples, shoot them right back to Earth. So it's a mission, not a campaign to do a sample return. Perhaps that would be useful to have some ground truth of Mars that could be used for various purposes to validate a whole bunch of assumptions about Mars. But and integrate that in with the rest of the program. But I think that focusing the whole program on sample return is in danger of building it actually into an even higher risk situation than the one we're in right now, where we're not betting a $2 billion mission for the program, we're betting a $6 billion Mars robotic mission. I don't think we should be doing that. I think we should be flying $200 million, $300 million, $400 million Mars missions, flying them every 2 years, perhaps more than one every 2 years, and create the kind of very robust program. I think, I mean, I have a lot of problems with Dan Golden, okay? I dislike him personally, actually. And actually, I don't think I'm alone in that. But but I have to hand it to him. He did the right thing in 1993. When Mars Observer failed, we spent 10 years building this billion-dollar orbiter, and it failed, it fell flat. He said, okay, enough of that. We're not going to do 10-year missions anymore. We're going to do 2 years. And we had MGS in orbit around Mars 3 years after that failure, okay? And actually accomplishing 60% of the science that Mars Observer was going to do. And we had all these missions going, and when we had 2 failures in 1998, we were able to push right through that because we were locked and loaded for the next mission already. We didn't go into a decade of navel gazing. We didn't go into recriminations. We just pushed through. We did it. And, you know, we were in a very robust situation that we're not in right now. So I think, you know, this gamble may pay off, okay? But really, it's an uncomfortable situation where you're gambling the program. You know, and if it does succeed, we shouldn't get overconfident based on that and double down and start doing $4 billion Mars missions. Anyway, that's my viewpoint. And now let's hear for some others. How about you, Pete?
You know, I like Dan Golden, and I like Bob Zubrin, too, so. Darth Vader likes both of them, so what's the... and I really have to agree largely with Bob. My concern is money. We just don't have very much of it. And I'm a huge advocate of trying to find cheaper ways to do things. And just a little story, you know, there's a revolution in small satellites. And the guys that started that were now Sir Martin Sweeting from the University of Surrey. And the reason he started it was because Britain didn't have a space program. And he wanted to do space, and they didn't have any money. So he invented a cheap way to do space. And the first things he did were toys. You know, they were little tiny satellites that went beep. But before long, they were pretty sophisticated little tiny satellites, but then it didn't cost very much. And I think we need to invest a little bit of money in how to do really low-cost missions to Mars. And I think that exists. And it's because I think that's the solution. You know, I agree we ought to do lots of them, but I don't think they should cost $200 million. I think they should cost, you know, $10 million. And I think the technology is getting there to do that. You know, and again, you know, we sort of bemoan our space program because, you know, we're kind of flat-funded. What did my boss say? That, you know, flat's the new up. We have an up budget, you know, it's great. But you know, the rest of the world who doesn't have that much money, I mean, nobody else has $17 billion for their civil space program, are learning how to do a lot of things very affordably. I was in Sweden a month or two ago. You know, Sweden you don't think of as a big space power, but they are contemplating an asteroid mission for $4 million, not euros, although it doesn't make much difference anymore, I think. That technology is getting there, the technology to put high delta V, the ability to penetrate atmospheres like the Martian atmosphere. Not that we don't occasionally need to do big missions. I tend to be on Bob's side that I think we can do a lot with robots, but we need to keep in mind that in the end, we're going to send people there. I agree with Jim Green that we're really going to have to convince everybody there's no life on Mars or that it's completely benign before we send people there. I think that's going to be a lot harder political hill to climb than anybody imagines, especially as we find more and more evidence. And I think Curiosity is going to tell us that, you know, it's not going to answer the question, but I think it's going to give us some intriguing directions to go. But I would advocate we figure out how to do cheap missions using new technology, and so we don't just send, you know, 1 or 2 every 2 years. We spend 100 every 2 years, and I think that technology exists, and then everybody can go.
So let me represent the position of the astrobiologist on the panel. I'm pretty much in violent agreement with everybody except for one technical or scientific point, and that is the idea that there is no possibility of life on Mars in the near surface or near subsurface. I was the head of a team on the Phoenix mission, which was a 2008 low-cost lander flown through the Mars Scout program that evaluated the biological potential of the landing site, the Phoenix landing site. And our conclusion, which is a published scientific paper, which I'm the lead author of, was that it was a habitable region, that it was habitable for modern life, life in today's climate, and maybe not exactly today's climate, but in modern conditions. Since that mission flew, there has been really compelling evidence that's come from an orbital camera, the HiRISE camera, that there are flowing liquid water locations on Mars that are seasonally triggered. Quite probably those are brines. Brines means water mixed with salt. Life can live in water mixed with salt. No. In fact, you know, the oceans are water mixed with salt. So it is, in fact, quite possible that there is modern life on Mars, and that there is now, I think, growing interest in that. It's, you know, not a slam dunk for sure, but it is certainly worth missions to investigate that. I don't believe that it's necessary to have sample return to investigate whether that hypothesis is correct, but I think it is necessary to investigate it before sending humans.
Okay, so I get the last word. So I come at this this question, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this discussion, Bob. I come at this question from two perspectives. One is a purely science-oriented focus, and the other is public interest, and it kind of represents, you know, the way I split up my time and the hats that I wear. From a science perspective, just remind everybody that the planetary science community, just like the astrophysics community and the heliophysics community and the earth science community, went through, over the past several years, a process of figuring out what our priorities are for the next decade of exploration. That includes Mars exploration. And we thought a lot about fundamental research and the various, all the planets, not just Mars, telescopic observations, laboratory measurements, and all that, and missions. We thought a lot about missions. And this was a survey that was commissioned by the National Academy of Sciences. Congress pays attention to it. NASA headquarters pays attention to it. And the community involved something like 1,600 people in the community, scientists, came to some kind of interesting conclusions. So there are three classes of missions that NASA currently works in. Small, so-called discovery class of missions for planetary exploration, medium, new frontiers, and large flagship. We're about to see the most critical event in the history of one of the biggest flagship missions on Sunday, the landing of Curiosity. Flagship missions are several billion-dollar class missions. Viking, Voyager, Cassini, Hubble, these are flagships. We thought a lot about where Mars should fit in those categories of missions. And I'll start on the small end, because this is what Robert's talking about and many people are talking about. These smaller scale, $400, $600 million missions, that's actually small. These are the Discovery class missions, and the community was 100% behind having the ability to compete small missions for Mars. In fact, we're about to see the results of a Discovery selection coming up in a couple of weeks for the next Discovery mission, and one of those finalists is a Mars lander to do geophysics on the Martian surface. So small missions are open to us. We can do small missions. I would certainly like to see more frequent launch opportunities than have been coming up recently. It was supposed to be, when Dan Golden started that program, it was supposed to be every 2 years or so. And it's been more than 4 now for this selection, so we need to get back on that right pace. But I think there's definitely a market in terms of science and public interest for small MER class or even Phoenix class missions. The Mars Scout program that Carol talked about has gone away, so we don't have that available to us anymore. So there are plenty of things that we can do with small class missions and great science ideas out there, and we should compete for them in the market of ideas to try to win those competitions, and you're going to see that happen. The other end of the spectrum, flagship class missions. We talked a lot about that, thought a lot about that, a lot of inputs to the steering committee for that survey. What would it take to justify sending the next flagship to Mars? And the answer, from a variety of different corners and ways to look at it, the answer was sample return. Sample return provides the next possible big, giant leap in Mars exploration. Yeah, we could do more MERS, and we should find more places to find those samples. We should do discovery class missions. We should land in the South Polar region as well as the North, all of that stuff. But the ability to characterize samples in terrestrial laboratories far exceeds what we can do in a robotic laboratory in the Martian environment. And it will continue to far exceed, I would predict, for decades, because the technology is, of course, getting much better on the Earth as well. Yes, there's miniaturization, and the curves may cross at some point. But for the time being, for the foreseeable future, we can learn an enormous amount about the history of the planet and its habitability and its potential for having extant or extinct life by bringing samples back. And so the community decided, and this was if you know any of the history of this was a pitched battle with the Friends of Europa, right? Because Europa is another place out there that we have to go to, and it's going to take a flagship mission to do it, to land on the surface, to do an orbiter, whatever. It's several billions of dollars to do that kind of stuff. And so it was a pitched battle between, where can we get the biggest bang for the buck in this large flagship class mission, and Mars sample return won. And so the sort of law of the land now in this consensus-derived National Academy of Sciences survey is that the number one priority for flagship class missions is Mars sample return. So when Jim Green talks about this reorganization that's going on, of course, the government needs to reorganize itself every once in a while. That's a natural thing that happens. My focus is, how is this reorganization going to lead to meeting the goals of this decadal survey, leading towards sample return? Maybe we can't do it in one mission, maybe it'll take several, maybe we do it with several small missions that add up to a flagship, but maybe it takes more time. Okay? So that's kind of the perspective that I bring to this from the science side. And then the other perspective, being involved with the Planetary Society and talking with Mars Society folks, is that we have to bring the public along for this ride. We have to involve the taxpayers in these kinds of decisions. What is the most exciting science we can do? What is the most exciting exploration mission that we can do? How do we communicate those results best with the public? How do we tie what we do with robotics into the human program to get that kind of excitement and maybe trickle down into the robotic program and trickle up into the human program as well. So many different angles, many different aspects of this very complicated question.
Raise a level of controversy a little bit. What? And I'll ask others to respond to this. Mix it up a little bit. It seems to me that one of the things that is seriously impairing the sample return mission and promises to greatly impair human exploration is this obsession with back contamination. And some of these arguments that I've heard are amazing. At a workshop I attended recently, one prominent individual actually said, before we send humans to a site, we need to certify that there is no life there. Now, actually, it seems to me that this is the reverse of the proper thinking. That is, if we could determine with our robots that there is life somewhere, that is exactly where we would want to send people. Okay, I mean, you determine the most interesting locations on Mars to send people, and that's where you send people. And clearly the most interesting thing you could possibly find on Mars would be life. Okay, or similarly, you know, the discussion of the design of some of these sample return missions being complexified by a requirement that they be able to sterilize the sample before returning it to Earth, which, I mean, hello, if you're going to do a sample return mission, I mean, if Carol's right and there is life in that sample, the last thing I want to do is sterilize the sample. To me, it is by far the most scientifically interesting thing in the sample I tend to doubt that there would be life in a sample from the Martian surface, but my God, if you're bringing back a sample from the Martian surface, I'm very interested to see, well, is there life in it? And you know, it's like if you discovered a viable dinosaur egg, would you kill it? Because after all, there could be diseases in it. And by the way, the point is not completely irrelevant because paleontologists do not sterilize fossils, samples, or, you know, the archaeologists do not, even though they're digging up remains from periods in the Earth's past when there absolutely were pathogens around, including deadly plagues, and yet they do not do that. And
Actually, they do.
well, not any archaeological site that I've seen in the American Southwest.
In fact, that's one of the, there's something called valley fever in Phoenix that has caused quite a lot of concern. So
All right,
now
but-
required when you dig up those sites to treat.
Okay, well, we certainly don't require.
Just a clarification.
Okay, we don't require it of gardeners who are digging up sediments from the Earth's past. And no, but seriously, also, and it's not academic, because, for example, if you take the design of the sample return mission, okay, the simplest mission, and with 900 kilograms that you can land on the Martian surface, it is absolutely possible from an engineering point of view to design a two-stage vehicle that will take off directly from the Martian surface and go straight back to Earth and do a direct entry with a capsule, that you do not have to do a Mars rendezvous in the mission, and so you don't have to have an autonomous rendezvous and dock. That requirement is eliminated from an engineering point of view. It's only reinserted from the point of view of people concerned with back contamination who say they want to break the chain of contact with the Martian surface. And now all of a sudden you have a Mars sample return mission that involves 2 launches, 2 spacecraft, and an autonomous rendezvous and dock between the 2 of them, okay, which doubles your mission cost and risk, more than doubles the risk of the mission. If either one of these spacecraft fails, or if the rendezvous between them fails, you lose the mission. Okay? Whereas if you could do it straight away. So the mission's becoming much more complicated because of this requirement that's been levied on it. And now you have to ask yourself, you know, really,